what I learned from him was he had an opinion, as we all know, and we probably all of us we all have our opinions about music and what sounds good to us and what we like to play and what we don't like to play. But even though at times I felt he was being kind of critical on certain situations, when I thought about it, most of the times he was correct musically, you know, and I always loved him for his integrity. And we got a chance to really hang out one time before he passed away. I was driving him home from playing at Jenny's up in Harlem, and we got caught in traffic, and we were in the car for at least an hour and a half, and it was the most beautiful experience because I got a chance to hang out with my brother again. And we didn't really so much talk about music. We just talked about our families, talked about the great times that we had and the appreciation that we had this life, that we've been able to play music and make a living at it. And he, you know, Dwayne had a hard time with the whole kidney transplant. He didn't complain the whole time. He would have these things shipped to him all over the world so he could do his dialysis, and he just did the gig. You know, I have so much respect for that brother, and I miss him a lot.
My first encounter with Dwayne, other than hearing his music, but my first personal encounter and conversation was with him, was he came up to me once and introduced himself, and basically he had some objections to something I had written. So we talked about it for a minute, and I guess we kind of agreed to disagree, but thereafter it was like we had a dialogue happening. We had a connection, and it was always good to see him because he was good-natured about it, but he had certain ideas that he definitely wanted to make sure that I knew and that I got correct, and so that impressed me, because you don't always find that kind of thought in all the musicians you encounter. I should say present company excluded from that.
With Dwayne, you know, just like Antonio was saying, just like we all here know, he was very opinionated about a lot of things, and he was. And the funny thing about him was that he would never, unless really he felt moved, as in the case with Willard, he would really never say anything. He was non-confrontational. Mm-hmm. But then, you know, he get back home and get to writing, then you get like, you know, you get an email from him. I remember one time he was pissed at me that we were out in Europe someplace, and he was pissed at me because, you know, and usually I was pretty good about telling everybody that the payment was going to be in check, so it was never, I never did things maliciously like that, but I just had found out that, you know, the payment was going to be in check, and so of course he needed that loot right away. So when I told everybody that the payment was going to be in check and that you can cash it as soon as we get back, you know, tomorrow or whatever, you know, I was going out someplace and I saw him in the lobby on the computer in the middle of writing me a letter. And I'm waving at him. I'm like, hey, what's going on, Burno? I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, man, what's going on, man? I'll see this letter. You know, but you know, the thing is really about him is that he was always very vocal, and it really did teach me a lot about just how to treat, you know, the members in the band, and it carries over to any group that I lead right now, and so, you know, I have him to thank for that, and it was a tremendous learning experience outside of just the music, and I really immensely enjoyed having him be a part of the overall experience. And I mean, I could speak firsthand about having to, you know, there were a lot of times where, and I think we could all attest, all of us musicians here could attest to the fact that you might not, when you're on tour, you might not get the hotel information until the day before, or sometimes the day of getting there. And Dwayne was always like, oh, I need that hotel information so I can have insurance send the message. And there would be times where it would just be, I'd have to pony up, and we'd all actually take, you know, shifts carrying the dialysis. I remember one time they finally, you know, shipped all his medicine to one hotel in Berlin when I was able to get the information from the person, and there was like little crates of all this, you know, medicine coming out that we had to put in the back of the car and really just transport all over Europe, and in some cases even buy extra suitcases and pay overweight and put on the airplane too. So I mean, but it was all very much worth it, and I always told anybody that would listen, because they were definitely, and I think we all, some of us know his frustrations with a lot of especially big name acts that, you know, didn't want to hire him because they thought that he couldn't travel, or they didn't want to take the time to really get his medicine thing straight, which of course they didn't have to do, you know, spend a dime on really, but they just pretty much went with the fact that they didn't want to deal with it, which I think is a discredit to them.
There was one night, to give you an example, because he got me through a few different situations that aren't necessarily musical. But one night I was hanging at the 55 bar, and he was there with his bass. I think he might have been playing an earlier set. We weren't on the gig together. He was just there. And he's walking out the door, and he just had a look on his face. He didn't look. He just had a look, you know. So I said, "Man, you cool, man?" And he gave me a hug. He said, "Yeah, I'm cool. You know, my mom just rolled and walked out the door, meaning his mom just passed away." And watching, like, how he dealt with that at that moment, a few years later, when my mother passed, he was right there and just a supportive friend. And I could go back in my head and remember that moment and how he handled it. Not only did he handle it, you know, he's in New York, he was sick, the family's here, and it speaks to the kind of man, you know, really, it speaks to the kind of man that this guy was. I mean, and like Antonio said, and Jeremy can definitely attest, he didn't complain. We were in Roy's band together. We were in a few bands together, but we were in Roy's band together, and I watched him just carry that stuff around, never complain. I honestly, I don't remember ever hearing Dwayne complain about what he was going through. I mean, unless I don't remember. And just watching him and be there as a friend. A lot of people didn't know Dwayne as like this. They might have been scared of him or intimidated, but that was the sweetest guy I ever knew. And then when to be honest, when Wendy came into his life, woo! It was just like they just turned into two rays of sunshine. And then you got Quinn, who's so happy. I mean, running around and just you know, he was actually listening a little while ago. She texted me to tell me he was listening. So it's just they're just a beautiful family, great musician, all of that, but just a sweet guy, you know, and beautiful guy.